Okay, it's 10:15. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Michigan Works Association 2021 Annual Conference. My name is Lily Brewer. I am the Executive Director of Michigan Works for Barry and Cass and Van Buren. On behalf of the staff at the association and all of our sponsors, we thank you for being a part of the conference and this session titled Collaborating to Support Education and Training for Adult Education Participants. Be sure to visit the exhibitor booths during the designated exhibit hall times. And before we begin today's session, there's a few housekeeping items that I need to share with you. Please make sure your audio is muted, and you may ask questions and put those into the chat. And I will be monitoring the chat during the presentation, and we'll find a polite way to interrupt during the presentation to get those questions answered. We are eager to get your feedback about the conference and this session, so please take a few minutes to complete the short survey. The link is already in the chat box up at the very top, but I see that a lot of people have posted on there, so I will copy that again towards the end of the workshop so it's easier for you to find. Presentations will be available post-conference on the Michigan Works Association page. And with that, now I would like to introduce your speakers for this session. Christy Nelson, Regional Director of Adult Education with Northwest Michigan Works, and Lisa Scott with Northwest Michigan Works. Ladies.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our session. We're thrilled to have you here and begin this very, very important conversation about how we really can get support for our adult ed participants that are going into training to help further their resources for their family to make a good self-sustaining wage. It's good to see the wide variety of people attending. If we have time, we're going to try to make time at the very end because I see such a big group of people, diverse group attending, and it would be wonderful for you to share any ideas or thoughts that you may have. So let's go ahead and get started. Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can begin with introductions, with introducing yourself. Oh, I got to go back. Oh, my goodness.
Thanks, Christy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Scott, and I'm one of the regional directors for Northwest Michigan Works here in the Northwest Michigan Works. I'm responsible for planning and implementing workforce programming for the 10 counties in the Northwest Lower Michigan region for Northwest Michigan Works. Christy?
Okay, and I'm Christy Nelson. I'm the Regional Director of Adult Education. I've been in education for over 40 years. 26 of them have been in adult education. And yes, thankfully everybody's on mute. I am very old and I recognize every morning I get up. I started out as an ABE instructor in a classroom, then moved into a learning lab and taught as a learning lab teacher, on to becoming a learning lab specialist, and finally in my present position as the regional director. I've been doing this job for 18 years, and it's been really a wild ride because things keep changing, but I really am thrilled about all the options that we have for adult ed participants to really help them get their way and move forward on their employee path. Lisa?
Thanks, Christy. So as I mentioned before, we cover the 10 counties of Northwest Lower Michigan. Essentially, it's really all the way down to the Manistee, Cadillac, and Missaukee counties, all the way north to the Mackinac Bridge. If you sort of take the mitten of Lower Michigan and cut it in half, we're on the Northwest Lower Michigan. We cover 10 counties and we have 4 service centers. Our region is relatively rural in nature. And so that the rural nature of our region really is something that plays a big part in the way we plan workforce programming. And I guess just a general overview of the services that Michigan Works provides. I know some of you are here and are here from Michigan Works and are very familiar with the services that we provide. And some of you are less familiar, so I'll review those relatively quickly. Essentially, Michigan Works provides employment services to job seekers in the region, whether they are employed or unemployed. These could be job seekers who are looking to change occupations or to move up in their current occupation. And we provide a variety of services to help those job seekers achieve their career goals. One type of service that we provide is what I call career exploration. Career exploration sometimes it can take a while. Let's just say that, and it's really important. It can take many forms, but essentially it's intended to help job seekers understand and kind of zero in on the job or the occupation that they're looking for, and that can look many different ways. It could be informational interviews. It could be just talking with the job seeker and helping them understand what that job looks like. Is that job available in our region? How much could you expect to be paid if you're going to take a specific position? What type of credentials do you need? And what does a job look like that in real life? Sometimes job seekers romanticize a little bit jobs that they're looking for. And we try to bring reality into the situation if that's needed, but really trying to provide that expertise and guidance to help them make sure that this is really what they want to do and it will be a good fit for their family. We also assist customers as they look for jobs. Sometimes it's surprising to me, and I guess at the beginning of my job search, I didn't understand that either when I was entering the world of work. Where do you go? What do you do? How do you do it? And that can be an intimidating process, and our career advisors are here to help. And interview coaching, interviews can be difficult. They can be scary. You can be nervous. So practice makes perfect, and it also helps to relieve some of the stress of an interview. So we work with job seekers and help them sort of practice their interviewing. How do they answer, what questions to expect, how to answer certain questions. We take a look at their specific situation and help them anticipate questions that might be asked based on even a specific job that they're applying for. And then everyone kind of knows about resume writing and cover letters. We do a lot of that. Resume writing is a skill, and a lot of job seekers just don't have it. Hopefully they don't need that skill, but we are here to assist them and come alongside them to help them with that process. Probably a really big part of what we do is for those customers who need to gain some occupational skills or who want to gain occupational skills, we help them very often with tuition. We have funds set aside to help them with tuition for the classes that they want to take. And we can also help them with books or technology that they might need to take those classes. The goal is that they would be successful as they gain the skills for those higher wage, in-demand occupations that are available in our region. And then, sort of when they're coming in throughout this entire process, we are listening to them, we're providing some assessments to them, and we're having conversations that really help us to identify any barriers that they might have that could stand in the way of their success in reaching their occupational goal. So a variety of assessments, but a lot of it is really about talking with those customers and hearing their heart, so to speak, and just trying to listen for what is it in their family, what does their education look like, what is their background, what skills do they have. We take a look at those barriers and we try to identify them so that we can help mitigate them or reduce those barriers. We'd like for them to set them up for success as they enter their training. Christy?
Thanks, Lisa. One of the important things to mention in this conversation is Northwest Michigan Works was one of the pilot programs to receive a pilot grant from the federal government to start these one-stop centers. And when they did so, they organized it and invited adult education in. So we've been co-located co-located with Michigan Works since the inception of those one-stop centers. As you can see from the graphic, we are still together. We are in all four of the service centers, but we also have a fifth location in a service center that is only served by itinerant staff. And finally, we're in Benzonia, which is a community center that has invited us in, and it's a really great match that, again, they help provide services for adults needing support. The other interesting thing, as is in Benzonia at the Bacon Service Center, Michigan Works also has a presence there. So it really is a great, great match. Similar to Northwest Michigan Works, we are the only adult ed provider in Region 2. I believe the main reason for that, as Lisa mentioned, is we're primarily rural. And so it's really difficult to find different providers in such a rural area. We are open entry, open exit, meaning we're open year round. Students can register at any time and they can finish at any time. We do not charge any cost to any participant coming in. The other thing is we have a no wrong door policy, meaning everybody is eligible to attend our adult education program. We provide individualized instruction in basic skills remediation, or ABE, high school equivalency prep, also known as GED. If adults want to get their high school diploma, they can take classes through us for that, and that diploma is issued through Northwest Education Services, formerly known as TBA, Traverse Bay Area Intermediate School District. They are our fiscal agent, but our program is managed by Northwest Michigan Works. Finally, the two other areas that we provide instruction in are ESL and post-secondary prep. The really important thing about our program, I believe, is our, if you can see our logo at the top right-hand side of the screen, we are education for employment. So when students come in, they learn right away that learning is purposeful, and everything is tied to a career goal. So when people register, they not only take the TABE or the CASAS test, which is required by the state to determine their education functioning level, but we also provide career and digital literacy assessments. Once all of the registration pieces are complete, an individual learning plan is collaboratively built between the teacher and the student, and each plan includes 3 goals. There's an educational goal, a career goal, and a digital literacy goal. If you've heard any of my other presentations, I always refer those to the 3 legs of the stool. If one of those legs is missing, you're going to be tippy-toppy and often fail. So we want to make sure that students, adult ed participants, when they come to register, we help them see the value of having each of those 3 goals and the importance of those goals. Lisa?
So as it turns out, collaborating to support education and training is something that really goes hand in hand. It's been done in our region for as long as I can remember, actually. And there's a good reason for that. As we both support students in education, and our staff are trained, as Christy's mentioned, right from the beginning, that whatever type of education or training our customers or students are pursuing, the goal I guess the context for that is employment. So you're not just going to gain your credential just to gain your credential, whether that's secondary or post-secondary. You're working to gain your credential because you know that it will impact opportunities for employment later in your life. And we train our staff, and Christy trains her staff with that goal in mind. So as it happens, we have adult education students, and as they near the end of their time, I mean, they're always talking about employment. They're thinking about that. That's in the back of their minds as they're completing their secondary education. But they're also, the staff there are also talking to them about employment. So near the end, or sometimes in the middle of their stay in the adult education program, Michigan Adult Ed is starting to link those students with Michigan Works career advisors, because the secondary credential isn't the end of the road for them. They're already preparing those students for life with Michigan Works after they gain their secondary credential. And being co-located makes that kind of easy. They see the Michigan Works staff as they're coming into the learning labs, and they're interacting to some degree with Michigan Works already. And then on the other hand, we have Michigan Works customers who are coming to see us often specifically for assistance with training and job search, all of those things I've just told you about. But one thing that we may discover during our interactions with those customers is that perhaps their computer literacy skills might not be where they need to be for the job that they're looking for. Or maybe they are going into training, post-secondary education, and perhaps they're in class and having trouble successfully completing that class. Or perhaps they already know that their math skills aren't up to date. So we see Michigan Works customers for all sorts of reasons. And it's just a very natural referral where we can say, hey, we have learning labs where there are actual teachers who can help tutor you while you're in school. Or we can help prepare you for when you take that class in college so that you'll be successful and maybe won't need tutoring to begin with. Or in our region, we see a lot of customers who were in manufacturing and have been in manufacturing as an example for their whole life. And when they're looking to move occupations, it's possible that their job in manufacturing didn't have or require digital literacy skills for their occupation to be successful in that job. And now that they're looking to change jobs, they're like, oh, they realize very quickly that they need some help in that area. Thankfully, we have Christy and her team down the hall, and their staff stand ready to help our Michigan Works customers while they're engaged in activities with Michigan Works. It really is a great team. So although we're talking today a lot about futures for frontliners, the model that we're talking about and describing really can be applied to any workforce development programming. Christy?
Thanks, Lisa. So the future for Frontliners, just as a quick review, is funding that was specifically targeted to frontline workers that did not have a high school diploma or a GED. Training can be short-term from programs listed on the Michigan Training Connect program or also at a community college. Because the funding only covers tuition, it was quickly noted that there were gaps in funding that could immediately set up our participants for failure. We recognize there's just simply a need for additional funds to provide adequate support. As a program, and all of our Michigan Works directors gathered together, and we met to discuss the funding and define a process of how we could process this new funding source and our adult ed participants into the system that was already in place. Typically, for those adult ed programs here today, that funding typically went to adult ed programs, but in our region, because Northwest Michigan Works is the recipient of the Title II funds, that funding actually went to Michigan Works. So it was decided that funding would be treated just like all other funding that Michigan Works uses to provide training for their participants. So the process is going to be the same. The approval process would follow the present process that was in place. It would be run through the Michigan Works career advisors, and Lisa's going to talk to you more about that process. And in addition, we have two handouts that are included with this presentation that Lisa will talk about that I think are really important to ensuring and helping people understand how to access training and get started. And I like to also always kind of set the stage. If you can go back, for me, it's a long while back, to the first time you went to college, you were doing a lot of new things that you'd never done before. Filling out Pell Grants, filling out the FAFSA, applying for college, selecting classes, all of those things are pretty difficult. And oftentimes adult ed participants are first generation attendees. And so that process can be very, very fearful. And a lot of hand-holding needs to take place. In addition, even in my own home, I have 6 daughters, 4 of which went on to college. And again, I saw the need for that hand-holding and really helping them step through the process so to make sure they're successful, and to also kind of be a cheerleader to make sure that they feel comfortable in this new endeavor that they're attending. Lisa?
Yeah, thanks, Christy. And it really is a lot about encouraging or cheerleading, as Christy mentions. Why not have lots of people on your team to help you be successful? Many times we find that support systems are limited for Michigan Works customers. Adult education students would be included in that as well. So Futures for Frontliners, from a Michigan Works perspective, we know that funding is intended to be the last dollar in. That means that students need to apply for a Pell Grant first. And Pell Grant, to apply for that, you need to complete the FAFSA. And Michigan Works staff help customers do that. I know that sometimes community colleges have staff already that can assist with that process as well. Sometimes completing the FAFSA is a little bit of a barrier because it's an intimidating process. There's a lot of information that they're asking, but we try to help break it down for them and support, sort of cheerlead them through the way. You can do it. We will help you. And our staff have had training and do come alongside customers to assist with that, with the completion of that. And as Christy alluded to before, Futures for Frontliner funding does not cover all of the costs associated with going to school. Probably very few programs do, but we did recognize that when you're going to college, for example, even if it's a short-term training, tuition is just one of the costs. That the scholarship does not cover books for the student if you have to purchase books. It might not cover, it doesn't cover supplies. Maybe you need to buy notebooks and pencils and pens. Maybe you're going to distance learning and you need a computer or a tablet to attend class online. I know in our region, some students don't have internet service in their homes. So sometimes we help them by reimbursing them for internet service to their homes. Or sometimes we just help explain to them where they can access the internet, possibly not from their home. And one other thing about tuition, Futures for Frontliners does cover tuition 100% if you are living in district. And for our community colleges, in district means you live in the county that the college is located in. Well, we're a 10-county region. So that means that most of our population, or much of our population, lives outside of the county where the college is located. That means that they're paying out-of-district tuition. And out-of-district tuition costs more than in-district tuition. So many times those Futures for Frontliners students, that's one of the first questions we ask is, are you in district or out of district? And then we enroll those students in Michigan Works programming to sort of fill that gap. There's a gap. So let's just say you're going to school and it's $5,000 to attend, but because you're for tuition, but because you're out of district, it's $6,000. Well, there's $1,000 of tuition that needs to be paid, or you can't go to school there. So we work with the customer to identify the best existing workforce program funding source that might be able to assist them to cover that, either some or all of that balance that someone needs to be responsible for. And so what you see there is an example. We might enroll them in the WIOA program as an example. And so you might have a Futures for Frontliners student enrolled in the WIOA program, or any other workforce program that we have going at Michigan Works. We call that co-enrollment or braiding funding. We don't want to I don't know, we don't want to provide a lot of hoops for that customer to jump through, but we also want them to have all of the resources available to them that they need to succeed. So sometimes that means enrolling them in multiple funding sources so that they have all of the support that they need to make it through their program successfully. So at Michigan Works, we're working with these Futures for Frontliners students and other students. But how do we get those adult ed students who are Futures for Frontliners students, and how do we connect them to Michigan Works career advisors? Christy?
Thanks, Lisa. Indeed, Lisa, I just want to reiterate a couple of things that Lisa said. When Adult Ed received this funding, we weren't necessarily in the business of sending people to training. And so it was a learning curve for Adult Ed programs to learn how to do that. But really, this is Michigan Works. It's what they do. They're the experts. So we're letting the experts handle it by referring them to career advisors. And how do we actually do that? So, I mean, there are a multitude of ways to do it, but we did it simply by a shared Google Sheet. So this is a Google Sheet that's shared with all Michigan Works career advisors and all adult education staff. As a student in adult ed, as a participant in adult ed, becomes very active in adult education and they start making gains, they're placed on this spreadsheet. So it includes a referral date, the name of the student, the lab that they're attending. If you'll notice at the bottom, there are tabs, and that's for each of the learning labs. So this is all one document. We don't have to go look around at different spaces and places to find the information we need. It's all here. It tells the career advisor what program of enrollment they're in, whether it's high school equivalency or GED, whether it's high school completion. You can see some ABEs in here. And it also kind of gives the career advisor a little bit of information about what's happening with the student. You know, they've completed a GED, or they've completed a class, or they registered. If they came in and they started attending, but then they left the program, as you can see down here. So that gives the career advisor a little bit more information about the participant. It's just a brief one. We don't want any books. We want to keep this simple so that it's easy to use. In addition, once they're referred to the career advisor notes their name, and we also say what funding that they are probably eligible for. So you can see that, note that here. And the final thing is there are career advisor notes really talking about their contact and what's happening with that student. Both Lisa and I monitor this Google Sheet regularly. Actually, we have in our calendars to do it once a month. From an adult ed perspective, I make sure that if I'm looking at a lab and I don't see any referrals, it just bears a conversation with the teacher about what's happening and why those students aren't being referred. On Lisa's end, Lisa takes a look at it, and if there is a blank spot where a career advisor hasn't touched base with this student and they note the referral date over here, and it's been a while since they've done that, then Lisa will check up and talk to either the building manager or maybe, just to get an idea and see what's happening or why it's not happening. Again, the really important part is communication and collaboration and keeping track of everyone so that no one falls through the cracks, and we're making sure we're providing really good services for them. Once a participant has selected a training process, then the career advisor begins that training process. Again, it's not done in adult education. It's totally done with the Michigan Works side, but remember that the teacher is always part of it, working with the students, so they have two cheerleaders instead of just one, helping them get to where they need to go. So I'm going to pass it over to Lisa, who will talk a little bit more about the training process.
Thanks, Christy. As we get to know this adult education student, we're excited that they're interested in pursuing their post-secondary credential. And the Learning Lab has already completed a lot of work to get them where they need to go. So they understand now what the customer understands and knows. They've at least identified a potential career pathway. And they understand that this is now about employment. We're kind of shifting their focus over to employment now. And so as we're working on that, as we're identifying those and sort of solidifying a plan of services for that customer, and if training is, if in this case, Futures for Frontliners, that's what they're looking at. So they are looking at training. So if training is what is in the plan for that customer, we start working on the occupational training checklist. So, by this point, hopefully we've identified the barriers that they have that could be standing in their way to successful completion of training. But it's sort of one last step to document that indeed they do want to go down this career pathway. They do have the resources in place and sort of their life is set up so that this will be successful. What we don't want to do is put someone into training and they can't make it. So some of the questions that this asks is we just want to make sure our bases are covered. We might be asking the customer, so this is the career advisor taking a look at this and saying, okay, customer, based on your situation, these are the things that we're going to make sure that we complete together so that you will be successful. And it's different for every customer because every customer's situation is unique. So it's customized to their situation. We might ask them to conduct informational interviews. As I've sort of briefly mentioned, sometimes they've really romanticized the occupation that they're looking for. A lot of people in our region come to us, they're interested in truck driving, as an example. They say, well, I can be a truck driver. I can make a lot of money. And they have all of these ideas, and that's true. And if truck driving is the right fit for you, we want to make sure that we want to help you as you go down this path. But is that right for you? So we might assign to them, let's do 3 informational interviews, and we work to decide with them, who might be a good employer to do informational interviews, so that they explore that a little bit more and learn about what a day in the life might look like in a specific job in our region. If they have children, we want to make sure that their children are taken care of. Perhaps childcare. Well, if you're going to school at night, it's just a conversation with the customer. What are your plans for childcare? Who do you have to watch your children to make sure that they're safe while you're pursuing your occupational training? We might work with them and say, you should probably attend this workshop or this workshop. If sometimes it's just preparation for going into the school. Have you completed the FAFSA? If you haven't, we need to make sure that happens. So the occupational training checklist is really just one last look to make sure that we've identified the barriers that we can, and then make sure that barriers that we have identified and have been addressed sufficiently so that student will be successful, we hope, while they're in training. Once we have that down, I guess even during that process, so it's pretty sure now they are going to go into training in a specific occupation. So now we're planning out, we're going to pay for some of that training. We're going to cover some of those costs. So we start completing the occupational training agreement, and this is something the career advisors do. And they really here on that sheet, they talk about who is this, when do they think the training is going to start, how long do they think it's going to take, what are we going to pay for, what aren't we going to pay for, what else needs to be considered in the specific plan for training so that the customer has everything covered in terms of classes. And so we document all of those types of things on this agreement because we want to be as upfront as possible. We want to make sure that they understand that, so your Futures for Frontliners scholarship is going to cover these things, and Michigan Works has agreed to cover these things up to this amount. And we all sign it, and we just want to make sure that everyone is clear about the plan moving forward. There have been instances where this has really come in handy because the customer will say, well, Michigan Works was going to pay for that. And, that's can be a hard conversation. And we do try to come in and assist in those times. But this really helps to make sure that there are no misunderstandings and that communication is very clear. Christy?
Thanks, Lisa. And in that occupational training agreement, I just would like to make a quick mention that it shows some of those funding sources, training funding sources, but that list will entirely grow with all the new initiatives that the governor's recently put out. I know that locally, Northwest Michigan Works received the MyLeap grant, and of course, Future for Frontliners will be on there. But that training source will dramatically grow and change as we get involved in all those new trainings. So I think a part of this conversation today is an important one, and to really talk about the barriers to success for programming. This really isn't an easy program and an easy thing to do. And I think it's important to just discuss those things, even though we're co-located, even though we have all these resources. It's still difficult to get adult education participants to join training. And the very first part of that is they just may not recognize the value of training. They understand it costs money, but I can't tell you how many students I've listened to that get through the Cooter journey, which what we use as the career assessment. And they said, I'm not going to college. You're going to spend all this money on college and all this time, and I can just get a job and go get a job for $17 an hour at the local Burger King, which is true. But it's really important to help them see the long run and the end goal of getting a self-sustaining wage and helping them understand that. The other real big thing is when they talk about training, they immediately think that it's going to college, and they aren't aware that there's those short-term training options. So really, it starts at the very beginning with the teacher when they're doing that original career planning to say, hey, you're right. If don't want to go to college and you don't see yourself as going there, then there are some short-term training options. Early, when we started to really get our adults to go to recognize the need for training, we actually took them on campus visits, and we call it trying to get them to understand campus fever, because once they get there, they start seeing people that look like them. They're not all young college students, they're older adults, and so they start to feel more comfortable. And as they talk to campus staff, they start realizing, well, this may be kind of cool for me. I could possibly do it. The colleges do a really great job of helping our participants feel comfortable as they come on campus, to help them recognize and see that this is a viable and easy option for them. And again, with all the abundant training available, it's really important to help them take that step. The other thing we're finding is that adult education participants are reluctant to co-enroll in Michigan Work Services. Even though they can help, they just really don't understand what it is what services they'll need and what's the value of enrolling. I like to tell everybody, if you send me into a bakery, I have no problem choosing something that I really like. Conversely, if you send me to an auto parts store, I have no clue where to begin or what to select. And sometimes I feel awkward asking for what I need, because often I call it a thingamajiggy to do what's it called. And hopefully somebody there can interpret what I'm trying to ask for. I think it's kind of the same thing with Michigan Works. People aren't really understanding how Michigan Works Services can benefit them. So all of this takes career planning and time and effort. And oftentimes that's difficult for the teaching staff to fit this into the teaching time. They struggle with that being more important than teaching, which absolutely is most important. But career planning is often overlooked as not important enough. And so we need to really change that message and that thought process with our staff to help them see how can we collaborate to help get this working and going. Lisa?
Right. It's not easy. I mean, Christy told you we're co-located, which means in our case, it means that Michigan Works staff are just steps away from the adult education staff and vice versa. But siloing is still a real thing, and we're always fighting against siloing. I've heard about this whole idea of siloing since I first started here over 10, 12 years ago. And as much as we combat it, it's still there. It's still a real thing. We just have a tendency to continue moving forward with our thing without looking outside at our partners. But one of the things we're really good at in our region, I will say, is collaborating. That's how we get things done here. We say, so we're always fighting against siloing. So sometimes that communication just has to be encouraged and revitalized between our staff. And we provide opportunities for that to happen organically, and we encourage that between our staff. So that's one of the things that we have to try to do, purposefully try to do. The other thing is, in our region, I don't know about you, but wages are increasing. I think a couple of the major fast food establishments are now advertising paying wages $20 an hour. Well, it sort of goes back to what Christy said. Well, why do I even need to attend post-secondary education? Why do I need to keep working at that if I can work for $20 an hour at the local fast food establishment? A valid question, and we walk through those questions and have those conversations with the customers to help them understand these are a few reasons why pursuing your post-secondary credential is a good idea. And another thing is there are a lot of ways you can gain your skills. It's not only, you don't have to go to college, you don't have to go to training. There are many ways that you can attain your skills. I know the up and coming generation. I mean, I have three children, and they tell me, well, I can just get my education on YouTube. They say, I mean, okay, that's resourceful. But then I do try to point them in this direction. I think one of the reasons in having many conversations with them and others their age they're like, I just want to do it. I just want to do it and get it done. It can be an intimidating process. You mean I have to sign up for something? That's a commitment. Well, it is a commitment, but it's a worthy commitment. So these are the discussions we have with these students. And then, we have this process set in place. We set up our spreadsheet, we set up the referral system, but we're finding that even with all of these things that we have in place, these purposeful strategies that are in place and working here, it still requires relationship building. So in the case when there are Michigan adult ed students who are going to work with Michigan Works, adult ed students have already established relationships with the staff there in the learning labs. They know the teachers, they know the aides, they understand even just the environment, they're familiar with that. And so there's a level of familiarity and relationship the students have with that adult ed staff that they don't have that same level of relationship with Michigan Works career advisors. So when you put them on the list and Michigan Works calls them and they give us the reasons why they don't need to continue working with us, even though we're selling our hearts out, no, you do need this. It's coming down to a relationship building between those students and the Michigan Works staff. And so even now we're continuing to tweak our model so that there is opportunity for relationship building between those students and Michigan Works staff. We sort of call it a soft handoff, and we'll get to that in a few slides. And just a couple other barriers. I mean, there are so many. So these are just the big ones. Sometimes completing training or completing anything that is hard, it takes time and perseverance, and the thoughts go through their heads. Why am I doing this? Do I really need to do this? I don't think I want to do this. So here comes in the cheerleading squad. We're going to encourage them. You can do it. Remember, these are the reasons why you decided that these were your whys. This is why you're doing it. We remind them and we encourage them. Especially during a pandemic, suddenly your priorities become very clear during a pandemic or any stressful time period. And so those conversations have happened more often over the last year and a half than perhaps they did before. Because ultimately, life happens. Your car breaks down. You have to move. Someone in your family gets ill, and your life is uprooted, or another stressor comes into your life, and you think, okay, I can't do everything. What is something that I don't have to do so that I can do these other things? And many times for students, it is, I don't have to keep going to school. I can put that on hold. So, those things happen, and that's real life. And those are all decisions that we work through with these customers to help them make good decisions. And sometimes the pause is needed. And so we help them sort of plan what that pause might look like, especially with an eye toward, well, when should you pick this back up again so that you can be successful? If you can't do it right this moment, we understand. So we're going to stand by you and help you make a plan that's solid so that you can be successful someday. We don't want you to give up your dream. So life happens. Christy.
Lisa and Christy, before you continue, there have been some questions placed in the chat. I think this is a natural point to get these answered. So here's the first one. Is your high school completion program offered in Spanish at any locations?
It is not. We don't have a large ESL population, so we do not have it. We do have the ability to do it. We just have not done it because there's been no request for it.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, what assessments do you use?
I'm going to specifically talk about adult education. When people register, we use TABE for the ABE participants. We use CASAS for ESL, and those, again, in adult education terms, are to determine the education and functioning level. But in addition to that, we use Cooter Journey Assessment for the career assessment. We use BESI, which is the Barriers to Employment Success Inventory, and that is shared with the Michigan Works Career Advisors. We also use North Star Digital Literacy for the digital literacy assessments. We do other things that are tied to a Power Pass screening to determine whether or not people have maybe have some learning difficulties, but those are. Our registration process is about 16 hours, and it takes place on 2 different days. So it's very thorough.
Lisa, are there any other assessments used by Michigan Works?
We really use all of the assessments Christy mentioned are also at our disposal. And so the ones she mentioned are primary, but we open it up to our career advisors. They might come to us and say, hey, I found this one, or this one really works for me. So in addition to the assessments that Christy has mentioned, many others are used as well.
Great. Next question. Is there software or a program used to assist those who score at a deficient level on the CASAS assessment?
Yes, we use both textbooks, we use tutors, and we also use software. The software that we use for the CASAS for ESL is Burlington English, but we rely more heavily on tutoring and one-on-one instruction for those lower ESL students.
Okay. What about accommodations for learning disabilities, for individuals with learning disabilities? What do you do in those cases?
Well, I like to say that my background is in special ed. That's what I got my degree, my undergraduate degree in. And all of our instruction is individualized, 100% of it. So we do a very, very thorough screening at the beginning. Some of those include if somebody might have an attention challenge, an undiagnosed attention challenge. We look at whether or not they have visual stress, which means difficulty reading, black print on white paper. We do a lot of things, and we try to incorporate, when we create an individualized learning plan, all of those issues are addressed, and strategies to work with them both by the teacher and by the student are worked into the plan. So we do try to address those learning difficulties. We do not have people on staff that are official for special ed at this point. I know that's a big conversation in adult education right now, but we do recognize that probably a good number of our students probably failed in regular school because they didn't learn the normal way. So we try to address those differences, and we try to acknowledge and build those into a good plan where of things they can do in the teacher, how the teacher can support them.
Great, thank you. Two more questions. Actually, one is a statement and a question. These assessments are great. Monica Robbins put that into the chat. Do all adult education centers utilize similar assessments?
Almost all adult education programs in Michigan, and actually throughout, if they receive any federal funding, are required or mandated to have either the CASAS, the TABE. Oh, I know there's a couple of other ones. So those determine education functioning levels or grade levels, so to speak, if we want to put it in common terms. The other ones that I mentioned are not typical in adult education programs, but I think more and more of them are embracing them.
Thank you. And then the last question is, do the grants pay for online short-term programs?
Are you talking about Future for Frontliners?
I believe so. It's the grants specifically. I believe Lisa was speaking to MyLeap and some of the other WIOA programs, and I think the emphasis is online. Do they cover online short-term programs?
Lisa?
Yeah, good question. And yes, the pandemic, although there were some online options before pandemic, certainly now there are a lot more. Our post-secondary institutions are, building online learning into as many options as they can actually. So yes, MyLeap and the WIOA and other post-secondary grants, training grants, do provide tuition to support students who are in online learning situations.
Perfect. Thank you, ladies. And that's the last of the questions.
Great. I'm going to jump back to something Lisa said and to point out to adult education practitioners. With the Future for Frontliners program, training may cover time past their time when they're in adult education. And oftentimes we're not used to doing that, tracking these students and making sure that they're continuing on and they're getting the adequate support. I think that's another very, very important reason to connect them with Michigan Works, because both you and Michigan Works can work together, and hopefully one day that barrier is lifted between the One Stop and the mayor's programming that tracks both of our participants, and we can start making sure that they're successful by having two people pitching in or two groups pitching in to ensure success and making sure that they don't drop out, and if they do need to drop out, how to support them to go back in. Again, adult education typically hasn't done that. Michigan Works has done it all the time. So really important to think about that as you're utilizing this funding and trying to make sure it's successful. So I recently, I don't know if any of you have been to Grand Haven. I went to see the dancing waters at Grand Haven, and as I was looking for a graphic for this, I discovered the bridge in Grand Haven. And so we right now, as adult ed participants are accessing these fundings, they sort of see a bridge with both gates open. There's stuff on one side and stuff on the other side. We really, really need to work hard to close that gap and make that bridge accessible. And so and Lisa mentioned throughout this process, we keep morphing and doing different things. So one of the things we do is to close that gap is we're planning on doing more intensive career planning. But this time, rather than it just being an adult education program doing it, we're looking at doing it with both Michigan Works and adult ed staff. So the student adult ed participant gets to know both of these both of the staff and start feeling comfortable with them at a very early stage as they're working. Lisa?
Yeah, and part of the reason we're doing that is, I'm really excited about that, by the way, Christy. When you talk about that, I get really excited. One of the reasons we're doing that is because that's going to assist us with that soft handoff that we mentioned before. So yes, we have this spreadsheet where we're really using that spreadsheet just to make sure that the students who are referred don't fall through the cracks. But these career planning opportunities are really great opportunities for the students to be familiar, as Christy said, with both staff, but they all can also start building that relationship between the Michigan Works staff and the student. And then also during that sort of those opportunities to collaborate, that's a great opportunity for the Michigan Works staff to understand sort of how to work with adult ed students if there's a little bit of a different angle, and also to get to know each other better. You know, that siloing that we talked about before. If they're both working on a project together and they're both taking ownership of that, we think that's also going to build in just a more natural collaboration between our staff. And then again, those additional opportunities, we've even talked about allowing a space or planning a space for our staff to meet, perhaps monthly, perhaps weekly, however often it is needed. Certainly we're not going to ever stand in their way of that, but promoting that sort of model and opportunity to interact with each other for all the reasons that we just mentioned. They might be doing some collaborative case management in that room. So just providing other unique opportunities like that for our staff to collaborate.
Lisa, I think it's important to mention that it's important for the directors to model that type of collaboration. Lisa is just across the hallway from me. I think sometimes she wishes that wasn't. I talk to her all the time, but it really provides ample opportunities to really work on things that are making a gap or problem, and just having that informal conversation. In addition, we're very blessed, and I'm very blessed to be included in monthly meetings with all the directors of Michigan Works programming. So it gives me the opportunity to hear about their programs and how we can fold into them for our adult ed participants to access them. So it really, the closing the gap and building the bridge, it's building the bridges of relationships and trust. And I think all of those are important as you communicate and collaborate and cooperate with each other to really work well together to provide services for all of our customers. And I think that's really the most important thing to remember is they're not your customers, they're not my customers, they're our customers. They're all the same people, all requiring the same support and help that we can give them. And it's great to be able to work together to do that. Lisa, any closing comments?
I don't. I just have to echo what Christy said. It's too bad we're getting close to the end. You're not going to be able to watch the video during this session, but we'll make sure it's available to you. It just is. I really appreciate that sort of spirit of collaboration that Christy and her team have. We work really hard at this, and that's another important thing to remember. Is at first it was hard work. Like, we had to be very intentional about doing that. But now that we've been doing it together for several years, as Christy mentioned, it's natural for us. And I always have an ear to how can we bring adult ed into this? Does adult ed belong in this conversation? And being right across the hall really helps to have those just easy, quick, informal conversations. She's a great partner to work with.
Lisa mentioned, sorry, I'm jumping over here. Thank you, Lisa. Lisa mentioned the video. It's a 3-minute video. We did share it with Michigan Works, so you should be able to access it. And it really talks about the importance of training from an adult ed participant's point of view. I call it planting the seed. You know, you plant a lot of seeds and maybe sometimes 1 or 2 plants grow up from it. But if those 1 or 2 plants grow, then you're changing generations for a family. And so even if it's 1 or 2, that's just as important as many, many. So thank you all for attending, and thank you for caring. And and I should mention in the presentation, both Lisa and my contact information is listed. Feel free to reach out and email us or call us if needed. And I see Lily looking at the time, and I think we're close.
Yes, thank you so much for being mindful of everyone's time. This ends our presentation today. I would like to thank our presenters. We appreciate everyone's time. I hope you had some great takeaways and will enjoy all of the features of the conference. The exhibitor networking break is next. Please take the time after the session to video chat with the exhibitors or watch their informational video, or just go to the networking tab to be randomly paired with another attendee for 2 minutes to meet new people. I've also copied and pasted the survey on the chat. Please give us your feedback. It is very important. And with that, have a wonderful day. Enjoy the conference.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.